Hello and welcome to the Center for Spiritually Integrated Arts, a Centers for Spiritual Living teaching center. I am Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson. I am the founder and the spiritual director. Now, as you are sitting there joining us, you may have questions, any number of questions, such as, who am I? How did I get here? Spiritually integrated arts means what exactly? What is a teaching center? Well, what is Centers for Spiritual Living? What is that? What does that even mean? Or New Thought, or religious science, or science of mind and spirit? You may have any number of questions about this specific community, about the parent organization, CSL, our philosophy, our teaching, our liberation theology. Any number of questions. Feel free to send an email. We look forward to connecting more and building our virtual community, our global community. And if you haven't connected yet on social media, feel free to do so. This is your invitation now. Also, did you know that all of our Sunday messages are archived on our YouTube channel? You can watch it anytime. Now, questions about anything, such as becoming a member. What does that mean? What does membership entail? And if you live somewhere far and already belong to a spiritual community, can you be a member of more than one? The simple answer is yes, you can. Just like you can shop at more than one grocery store, you can attend or be a member of more than one gym. We are building beloved community. So you can do both. You can be a member of both. You can be involved with both. That's what being in spiritual community means. So we welcome you. We invite you. We are so appreciative that you have found this community and that you have joined us today. We bless you. We love you. We welcome you. Live long and prosper. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of our Sunday message. Love you. Connect with you soon. Blessings. Namaste and greetings. As we continue our discussion within the month of February regarding divine discomfort, today we are specifically addressing the concept of pain pushes until the vision pulls. Pain, in a generic sense, acts as a pushing force that compels us to address discomforts or challenges or obstacles, etc., while the vision of a desired pain free, obstacle free, challenge free outcome serves as a pulling force that inspires us to move forward and upward and to make more effective life affirming choices and changes in our lives. By recognizing the interplay between pain and vision, we are able to harness their combined influence in order to propel personal growth, personal transformation, evolution, resilience, and well being. Okay. Yeah, breathe, because that's where we are. This is going to be an interesting one. So, right off the bat, I'm letting you know you are entering the zone of linguistic convenience because there's going to be a lot of word play about what pain is, what discomfort is, what a vision is, and pushing and pulling. So, I'm letting you know up front so you can't say you haven't been warned. So, if you recall, back in October of last year, 2023, we talked about the genius of the and, this playing with paradox, and how it's easy to think that pain is necessary, as you see on your screen. No pain, no gain. As you see on your screen, suffering is not for nothing. As you see, it is often through the deepest suffering that God teaches his people the deepest lessons. I don't know if you remember or if you were around for this lesson. If not, I recommend you go back and watch the whole thing. But for our conversation today, we are also reminded that, once again, linguistic convenience, that within the idea of pain and suffering, this idea of a God that inflicts pain and suffering for us, God's children, God's people, to learn is deeply rooted in cognitive imperialism and the consciousness of colonization. And anytime anyone in New Thought promotes this idea, it's actually old New Thought, not actually what New Thought is or is supposed to be. I know that's a big thing, but keep in mind, pain is not necessary for us to learn. Does 1 plus 1 equals 2? Does it hurt? Is there pain? Is there discomfort? Now, for some children learning that, there was anxiety regarding math or science, writing in cursive. There was some anxiety and stress related to that. But there are other kids who there was none. If pain was necessary, then all would have discomfort. Suffering is not for nothing. Well, that implies that when some suffer, or when all suffer, there is a reason for it. Well, who determines that reason? Based upon what Elizabeth Elliot would have us believe, it's God. God allows or God inflicts the pain and the suffering in order for us to learn. So part of our question today is, just sit with it. The pain that is pushing, do I believe that it's necessary in order for the vision to pull? And if I believe that the pain is necessary in order for the vision to pull, where did that idea come from? What is the reason that I still hold that paradigm or that mental equivalent? How does it serve me? In the broadest sense of the meaning, pain, some form of physical suffering, discomfort, can be caused by injury or illness. Now, we know there are a variety of kinds of pain. There's emotional pain and etc. Pain can also mean careful effort, to take great care. Pain, the cause of mental or physical pain as a verb. Do we believe that this is necessary? It is necessary to experience some form of torment, agony, hurt in order to have a vision that pulls us. In the grand scheme of things, and this quote has been attributed to several different people, which is why there is no name on here. So you may look it up and you may find a variety of people. But just so you know, it's been attributed to many. So I'm leaving it as, in essence, anonymous. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Is it? Pain is inevitable. Everyone is going to, in some way, shape, or form, get a paper cut, stub their toe, get an eyelash in their eye. Tracy probably has one right now. Like, there are a variety of ways, a broken heart, grief, sadness. There's pain. That is inevitable. It is part of being human. Suffering is optional. That implies that it's a choice. Who chooses to suffer? The 13-year-old transgender individual who is on the borderline of being kicked out of their home, no family support, bullies in the neighborhood. They're 13. How is that suffering optional? The person who is experiencing whatever the addiction is, and they are now homeless, unhoused, they are now dire straits, eating out of garbage cans, they're suffering, contemplating ending their life. How is that suffering optional? Because once again, optional implies there's a choice. Nietzsche says, based upon his belief, that the world is full of suffering and that it lacks any overall purpose or meaning. However, he also thought that our ability to deal with this suffering, to endure hardships and overcome them, is an important and valuable exercise of our power and character. Now, the important thing in this is, and I don't necessarily to endure the hardship. I understand where he's coming from. So what comes to mind? Someone like Harriet Tubman, who endured the hardships of the system in order to, one, escape slavery, two, to return via the Underground Railroad to bring others to freedom and safety. I think of people like Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who endured the hardships of Jim Crow, Southern or systemic apartheid here in the United States of America, in order to overcome them. When I had surgery, endure the hardship of giving my body the space. So yes, I understand completely. I want to make sure that we do not get into the mind frame that just endure. In the original Color Purple film, Celie tells Sophia, because Sophia was struck or beaten by Harpo, The essence of this world is temporary. Deal with it. Heaven is always. Endure the hardship. Tina, don't divorce Ike. Endure the hardship. Once again, I want to be clear that we do not allow the idea, simply endure. Don't bother, because it's, I hear it even within New Thought, the idea of being long suffering rather than doing the work that is necessary to heal, transform, and evolve. It's important for us in New Thought to understand that pain and suffering may be an individual's experience, and we are not invited to bypass or segregate or compartmentalize, to malpractice spiritually by making their pain and suffering about their consciousness. Now, there are those times when we choose some form of, we chose that. We accepted the risk of knowing, yes, there are certain aspects of, but there are far many others that simply occur because we are human in the world that we are in. So it is important that we learn how to adapt, recognize, adjust, and heal, or engage the healing process, because healing is an ongoing thing, like evolution is ongoing. To engage the healing process no matter what the pain and or suffering may be. As the author Tom Seaman says, to move beyond pain and suffering does not necessarily mean to live without pain and suffering. It means learning to adapt to adversity. So the most difficult parts of our lives are no longer the most significant parts of our lives. Life comes at us quickly and is like a series of doors. Sometimes we don't like the doors we have to go through, but we still have to walk through them. How do we walk through any of the doors? I didn't want to walk through the door of a cancer diagnosis, but I walked through it nonetheless and did what was necessary nonetheless, and am still healing nonetheless, even amid all of the challenges nonetheless. How do we elevate our spiritual practices, our embodiment of science of mind and spirit, in order to truly address all of life experiences? Dr. Holmes says, life is for us today. There will be no change for tomorrow unless we do the changing today. Today, we are setting in motion the power of tomorrow. Today is God's day, and we must extract from it what of life we are to live. Now, other than anthropomorphizing God, I get where he's coming from and can relatively agree, because now is the only moment we have. So any change or changing that is to occur occurs right now. So what changes are we invited to engage in right now? What changes are we avoiding right now? Now being the only opportunity, now being the point of power in our lives. Billy Cox says, life will only change when you become more committed to your dreams than you are to your comfort zone. And once again, linguistic convenience, remember what warning at the beginning. I understand exactly where he's coming from, and
still, both and. It is important to understand so that we don't bypass or malpractice spiritually the idea that might imply that the reason this person is in pain is because they're not committed to their dreams. The reason this person is suffering is because they're not committed to their dreams. Let us be clear that that is not always the case. Breathe. There are a lot of people who held tight to their dreams and still they endured, still they faced whatever it was that the system, the operating system, put before them and around them, and in some cases within them. It is important to realize that it's easy to make it about someone else's consciousness and for us to acquiesce and say, well, they should pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I did it. Not everyone has boots. So breathe and remember. And as Jan Martel says in his book, The Life of Pi, when your own life is threatened, your sense of empathy is blunted by a terrible, selfish hunger for survival. See, it's difficult to dream when you are fighting for your very survival. It is difficult to feel empathy when your very life is being threatened. How do we address whatever it is we are invited to address so that no one's life need be threatened, that no empathy need be blunted, that everyone gets the opportunity to live fully versus just doing their best to get by? And when we think of the idea of survival and all of the things that create a system where people even feel the need to fight to survive, let us come to mind, or let's allow it to come to mind, something that happened in Christmas Eve or somewhere around Christmas Eve 2023, where these two brothers, one 14, the one in the lower corner 14, and the one in the upper area 15, both had guns, but the 14-year-old and the 15-year-old got into an argument over Christmas presents. Who had more? Who had what? Their sister, I don't remember her age, but she was holding her 10-month-old baby in a carriage, carrying crib kind of thing. Could tell I'm not very lingo with the baby paraphernalia because I don't know exactly what it's called, but it holds the baby. It's got a handle, and the 10-month-old baby is in that. And an argument ensues, and the 14-year-old shoots his sister in the chest and kills her. She falls. She drops the baby. The baby was fine because it was in that carrying thing. The older brother, 15 years old, comes out of the house, yells at the 14-year-old that he shot his sister, and he shoots his 14-year-old brother in the stomach and then flees the scene. Many things in this that we would call tragic. A mother killed, a child now motherless, two young men whose lives potentially ruined because they may go to jail for the rest of their natural lives, any number of things. Why was their guns? They're teenagers. Why do they have readily access to guns? A whole bunch of things. And yet someone said, any tragedy has inherent in it positive good. Would we dare to say that this tragedy or any tragedy, would we say, but there's inherent good in there? In other words, focus on the good, not so much on the tragedy. And while I understand the concept overall, I do not agree necessarily, simply because it is easy for people to bypass and malpractice by not addressing what caused the tragedy in the first place, so that that cause can be eliminated, so that we evolve beyond it, so that tragedies like that never occur again. Is this not what medicine attempts to do in finding a cure for polio or any other illness or disease, so that no one ever need experience polio ever again? That is the intention, is it not? So Howard Thurman says, it can be said that any tragedy has inherent in it positive good. Given the fact of pain as a normal part of the experience of life, one may make the pain contribute to the soul, life meaning. One may be embittered, ground down by it, but one need not be. Choice. You have a choice that you can be ground down by the trauma and the pain, but you don't have to be. It's easy to use any of this to bypass, to say that when someone is in pain or suffering or grieving for an extended period of time, that somehow this is their choice, because they need not be. So if you don't have to be in pain, you don't have to be ground down by the trauma, by the tragedy. You don't have to be. But if you are, how is it that you are? In some way, shape, or form, you must have chosen that. And that is highly egregious. It is a dangerous position to even hold. You may not say it to a congregant, a friend, or a family member, but even to hold that as that's what you believe, it is still going to outpicture in some way, shape, or form, in a nonverbal, non-expressed, communicated way, but it will show up in the very atmosphere of how you show up, if it's what you believe. It may be a side eye glance that says, why are you doing this? Sucking the teeth. Any number of ways that this idea will still find expression if it is the mental equivalent. So once again, linguistic convenience. It's easy to linguistically juggle these words in order to bypass tragedy, pain, suffering, to make them non relevant rather than address them head on, so that they can be healed or engage in the healing, but so that they can be addressed. Our failure to address gun violence, for example, will continue to have teenagers with guns in hand continuing to cause more tragedy after more tragedy after more tragedy. So, how do we address any form of tragedy, the tragedy of war, the tragedy of sexism and gender bias? How do we address any tragedy, any form of whatever is causing young people to end their lives because of bullying, because of religious persecution, etc.? Our invitation is to go all in. What is the continuation of this phrase? God won't give you more than you can handle or more than you can bear. Once again, it's an anthropomorphic idea of God, that God is giving you the pain, giving you the suffering. And I know you may think, but Reverend Ray, this doesn't exist within New Thought. Yes, it does. There are quite a few ministers who have said this very thing. God doesn't give anyone any more then they can endure, then they can bear, then they can handle. So the Holocaust, God gave that to them because God knew they could bear it. Slavery, God gave that to them because God knew they could endure it. Any of the wars happening on the face of the planet at any time, God gave those tragedies and that suffering, those bombs and those bullets, because God knew that they could endure and bear the pain, the suffering, the trauma. Metaphysical malpractice, borderlines on some form of spiritual terrorism. It is harmful. It is harmful intellectually. It is harmful physically. It is harmful spiritually. And we are invited to surrender and move beyond that. So breathe. Because to move beyond this means we have to be willing to relinquish old new thought, relinquish the old paradigms that we learned that taught us any of this in the first place. Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith says, not all pain is negative, even though we label all forms of pain as such and we resist them. Positive negativity is a circumstance that causes us to go deeper, to search ourselves, to stop placing blame on the causes of the suffering outside of ourselves, and to take responsibility. Once again, linguistic convenience. I understand exactly what he's saying. However, we are still going to remix this. Remix says, not all pain is life denying, even though we generalize all forms of pain as something to be avoided and resisted. Being present to the pain, in whatever form it takes, can invite us, if willing and if able in the moment, to introspectively go deeper, to search ourselves, to take the necessary actions to change what needs to be changed. Did you get the difference? One, there are going to be people who, for whatever reason in that moment, cannot give up their addiction. And we are not to blame them or vilify them. Where they are in their lives in this moment, they're not at a place intellectually, mentally, spiritually, whatever. They're not in a place where they are ready or able to relinquish the addiction. And this is one reason why we say some people have to hit rock bottom before. Some people have to fall completely down before they. That's one of the reasons why we say it. And regardless, but I don't even want to go there. The point is, what happens when we give that person greater compassion? Because the war on drugs it has nothing to do with drugs. It's a war on people. And most often it's a war on the people who are the ones addicted to the drugs. And we vilify them and criminalize them. That does no one any good. So what happens when we love them, compassionately care, have enough of a system that offers mental health and physical health and all forms of health care for everyone to such a degree that, as Dr. Gabor Mate says, you don't necessarily have to have trauma to develop an addiction, but if you go somewhere back here, you're going to find some kind of pain that becomes an addiction. What happens when we create systems that are so powerful and so life affirming that the initial pain, now once again, some pain's not going to be avoidable, but the pain of bullying, the pain of homophonia, the pain of racism, what happens when we can eradicate that, that it no longer morphs into this person becoming addicted to. Now, once again, there are going to be some pains. Someone gets a divorce and they feel the grief and sadness of the divorce, and that pain becomes an addiction to work or an addiction to alcohol. That pain may not be avoidable, but if we have things in place, spiritual health care, medical health care, we have all forms of, then this person will be supported before the divorce, during the divorce, after the divorce, which greatly reduce the likelihood that an addiction will even form in the first place. So our call is not to sidestep or bypass the discomfort, the pain, etc., whether it's ours or someone else's, but to be present with it and be part of a new system that helps ourselves and others move through their experiences and their pains and their suffering. So we talked about pain earlier. So what exactly is suffering then? So examples of physical suffering: pain, illness, hunger, poverty, and death. Mental suffering: grief, hatred, heartbreak, etc. Now, there are many attitudes regarding all of this where we talk about anything from light suffering to extremely heavy and harmful suffering and everything in between. Yeah, got it. At what point do you say that when this, I'm hungry? Right now, I'm hungry. But am I suffering? No. So at what point does that hunger that I feel right now become the hunger that later is identified as suffering? Right now, it's mild discomfort. 4 days of no eating. Am I suffering now? And what are we doing to alleviate that form of suffering? What are we doing to alleviate the type of suffering that comes from poverty or hatred, self-pity? Viktor Frankl says, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Some suffering, we're not going to find meaning in the suffering. But we can find meaning on the other side, meaning in the process of alleviating, lessening, removing the suffering altogether. In there, we find meaning. The suffering itself, we may not find meaning in that. And that's fine. I don't necessarily even advocate that you should look for meaning in the midst of that suffering. Look for meaning in the midst of what it means to be free of. In essence, that's what a liberation theology is. As a metaphysical liberation theology, that's what we talk about. How do you become free, emancipated from whatever the discord of every nature may be? How do you gain your freedom from it? In that, there is meaning. Again, Dr. Beckwith offers us, suffering is a great awakener. You already know where I'm going to end up going, don't you? Suffering is a great awakener. Human beings go through excruciating circumstances, and you will often hear individuals describe how their lives were changed for the better because of those excruciating circumstances. Suffering has its own gifts that are different, but equally as valuable as the gifts that happiness gives us. Again, I understand completely what he's saying, and In the realm of the linguistic convenience, I agree with everything that he's saying. And yet, because I know how easy it is for things like this to be used as the very thing to bypass, as the very thing to enter into metaphysical malpractice, we have to remix it. The remix says, suffering can be a great awakener. Human beings go through excruciatingly painful circumstances, physically, emotionally, psychologically. And while you will often hear individuals describe how their lives were changed for the better because of those experiences, there are countless others who died as a result of the suffering. Suffering has no gifts. We receive as a result of various factors such as medical care, therapy, supportive friends and family, spiritual practices, etc., that offer a way out of the suffering. Suffering as a type of trauma has no gifts and no redeeming qualities. Suffering, pain, challenge, right? Like you think of an obstacle course, there is challenge, and it could be really difficult. There are redeeming qualities that can be identified readily in such a challenge. Suffering, not so much. So the question is, when you are given the chance, given the option, what is your first instinct to choose, the challenge or the easy? For the average person, we choose the easy, or at least the easier, generally speaking. Now, we would generally want more details. Okay, so what are we talking about? If we're talking about a test, I would rather the easier test. If we're talking about exercise and fitness, if you say, like, there's a commercial that says something about, I think it's for a prescription medication, I believe, where they talk about just do one push up, you're good. Just eat one Brussels sprout or something, I don't know, green bean or something, and you're good. That's easy. Versus one push up or 100. I'd rather do the one. If I can get the results that I want from the one, I want the one. And yet, in order to really evolve and grow, we challenge ourselves. It has been said that if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. Well, yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, that's relatively accurate. Babies have to be challenged to grow, strengthen their leg muscles, to go from crawling to walking, and et cetera. We are challenged in learning math and learning cursive. There's a challenge to the dexterity, and yeah, yeah. As long as the challenge is not suffering, is not inflicting a degree of pain because you believe that the pain is necessary. When I used to teach martial arts, and I would have students such as you see, you up here, you see Chris, and here you see Andre, and because I could do a split, and they're like, "Whoa, Sensei Ray can do a split. I want to be able to do a split too." And like, that's a lot of stretching. Challenge. They were up to the challenge, and as you can see from Andre's face, it's a uncomfortable challenge. Chris is smiling. Andre's not. Challenge. If you want what the change is, are you willing to be challenged by it? By leaving your comfort zone behind and taking a leap of faith into something new, you find out who you are truly capable of becoming. Are you willing to step outside of your comfort zone to find out who you are truly capable of being? Imagine the obstacles that these women have faced and still face, and yet they persist. They endure in order to step into each new greater and greater iteration of themselves. Are we willing to do the same? Are we willing to stand as our true, authentic selves in order to be that which God is as us? As the new year continues, we are called to find out who we are truly capable of being. And in so doing, what are we capable of doing? The being becomes the doing. Our understanding and application of the science of mind and spirit is a crucial part of this endeavor. What challenges are we willing to address and overcome? What pains are we willing to address and heal? What suffering are we willing to address and alleviate individually and collectively in order to create, truly create, a world that works for all? This week's affirmation declaration, I will say it first, and if it resonates with you, say it with me on the second go round. My personal and my divine potential are more potent and more present than my problems. Together. My personal and my divine potential are more potent and more present than my problems. And so it is. This week's questions. What are some ways that pain can be a motivator? Discuss the various ways in which pain, whether physical, psychological, spiritual, or emotional, show up in life and how the pain can act as a powerful motivator for change. And in what ways do we in New Thought tend to malpractice when it comes to pain? Breathe. Number 2, how does focusing on a desired outcome, a desired vision, impact your behavior? What is your process for navigating your life and manifesting what you desire? And number 3, how do you distinguish between the challenges, the pains, the problems, etc., that are a part of your growth or a part of collective growth and evolution, and those that are counter to growth and evolution? What are some techniques that you use to reframe various challenges, making them opportunities for your growth and expansion? And what role do they play in supporting you in reaching your everyday, day to day desires and goals? Breathe. And let us enter into that space of infinite knowing, that space of recognizing and realizing God is all there is. It is right where we are because it is what we are. And because it is what we are, and when we align with that awareness, it changes how we show up. It has to. The moment I realize that I am a proficient martial artist or visual artist or whatever it is, it changes how I show up. It changes how I live, move, and have my beingness in the world. There's a certain level of confidence and conviction that comes with that awareness. So as we end this Sunday talk, we align with that conviction and that confidence of knowing God is, and what it is, I am, because it's all there is. So it must be right where I am. My thoughts are the thoughts of God. My words are the words of God, because there is no God out there, me right here, separate. There is only God. And so your thoughts, my thoughts, each person's thoughts, the thoughts of God. God thinking, God speaking, God feeling, God acting. And so we go throughout the rest of our day with this awareness, this confidence, this conviction, so that we can address any of the pains, the obstacles, the sufferings, the anything that is going on that is hindering other people from living their best lives. We address it, we direct it. We live our lives in such a way that we literally are a spiritual vaccine that creates the container throughout all of life, so that the collective consciousness shifts and changes and becomes more life affirming for all of life, for the entire existence on this small blue marble, so that the environment is given the ability to be healthy and healthy in its expression, so that all of it, the animal kind, so that all of humankind live, move, and have our beingness to the highest possible expression. That means war is no more, poverty and hunger no more, violence no more. Not in a world that truly works for all. So we breathe and align with that. The law says yes. So we gratefully allow it to be exactly what it already is, answered prayer. And we live by knowing that it is answered. And so it is. Namaste, blessings, much love and appreciation. And see you over in Zoom.